What's up, everyone? My name is Ethan. This is Courtside TV. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and let's get into it. So, today I wanted to talk about the Charlotte Hornets, who have had some really bad injury luck over the past little while. Today they lost Gordon Hayward for about 4 weeks with a sprained foot, so he's going to be out for some time, and we already know they're also missing LaMelo Ball due to his wrist injury. He might potentially come back right before the end of the year. This injury for Hayward puts him, back right around the time the playoffs are starting, with a little bit of time left in the regular season. So they could potentially be at full strength by the playoffs, but things are really tight in the Eastern Conference right now. They're in danger of slipping down the standings, so wanted to talk about them for the rest of the season and what their plans are for the rest of the year. So taking a look at the standings, the Hornets are currently in 4th place in the Eastern Conference, and that's honestly pretty surprising considering where a lot of people thought they would be to start the year. They're projected as sort of a borderline play-in team, but here they are, right outside of that top 3. The Sixers, the Nets, and the Bucks have really cemented themselves as the top 3 teams in the conference. Charlotte's down there at number 4. They're, leading the group of everybody else, basically. It's going to be the highest they're going to be able to go by the end of the season is 4. So, we'll just have to see how they continue to play, but they're leading the pack out of, all those other teams here. They're tied with the Miami Heat in terms of games back out of first. The Heat have played 2 more games than the Hornets have. They have 1 more win and 1 more loss. So, it's virtually a tie there. The Hornets just have the tiebreaker at the moment. So they're tied for 4 and 5. They're, a half a game up on the Hawks, a game up on the Knicks, game and a half up on the Celtics. So it's really, really tight. A couple bad days in a row, they could easily slip down the standings. But, all these other teams are playing mediocre basketball as well. Honestly, we've seen the Heat, Hawks, Knicks, and Bucks all sort of be up and down a lot over the past couple of weeks. So, there is a little room for error for Charlotte here. But, they're in danger of slipping down the standings if they start to go on a losing streak or aren't able to keep pace with some of these other teams. Some of these other teams get hot. I could definitely see a team like the Heat going on a streak. The Celtics, even though they have not been super great this year, they still, have some higher upside than a lot of these other teams. We've seen them play at a super high level, even if they're not doing it at the moment. So, potentially those teams could be ones to look out for in terms of passing the Hornets in the near future. But if we're being real here, I don't think they're in danger of slipping out of the playoff picture entirely. Just looking at the standings here, the Hornets are over 500 right now, and they would have to fall below the Chicago Bulls, who are at 19 and 28, in order to be out of one of those play-in games. They're currently 5.5 games up on Chicago, and, 4 weeks is a long time, but I think this Hornets team is still good enough, even without, Hayward, who's been their best player, and LaMelo, who has been very dynamic for them. I think they're still probably good enough to really, keep pace with all of these other teams here. They might slip, below Miami, like I said, or if a couple of those other teams in that range start to play a little bit better. But I don't think they're in danger of falling out of the playoffs entirely. They're going to be there at the end of the season. And, assuming that Hayward and LaMelo are healthy, then, they have the 4 seed with those 2 guys, having played most of the season. So they're going to be a dangerous team regardless when it comes to the playoffs. It just matters where their seed is going to be. And if they do fall out of that 4-5 matchup, you're looking at a first round series against, Philly or the Nets or the Bucks, which is obviously very tough. So I think it's going to be important for them. They're going to want to try to stay in that 4-5 range so that you get to play a team like the Heat or the Hawks or the Knicks rather than having to go up against, those top 3 teams in the conference in the first round. So that's really what I'd be concerned about if I was a Charlotte fan, because your only hope of getting to round 2 is staying in that 4-5 matchup. Now, are they capable of doing it? Yes. Would I pick them to do that? Probably not, honestly. We'll have to see. Who knows? Like I said, the Hawks, Knicks, and Celtics are all playing pretty mediocre basketball at this point, but any of them could get hot and easily leapfrog Charlotte here. And then in terms of their schedule, it's nothing crazy. I just looked over their upcoming games, and it's very average. They play a couple good teams here, play a couple bad teams there. Seems like they're about the middle of the pack in terms of remaining strength of schedule left. So should be just about average, and they should be able to get some wins. And they're going to lose to teams that are better than them, but they were probably going to lose some of those games anyway. So it's not that huge of a deal. I feel like losing these guys, especially if they're going to be healthy by the time the playoffs roll around. That's the biggest thing, and that's kind of the point we're at in the NBA season. That's a larger topic of discussion. But we're kind of at the point of the year where a lot of players are taking games off. Not saying that these guys are taking games off because they're legitimately hurt, but there's a lot of players who are out and rehabbing things, and they might stay out a little longer than usual because, yes, positioning for seeding is important, but what's more important is that you have everybody ready to go by the time the playoffs roll around. And so like I said, even if Charlotte does slip down, they're still the same quality of team. They're still the same caliber of team because they've played like a 4 seed all year, and so if they have their guys healthy, they're as good as a 4 seed team, even if they end up being a 7 or an 8, if that makes sense. And this team has been really, really awesome to watch this season. I've talked about them before, but they've been super dynamic. This is the most watchable the Hornets have been in years, specifically LaMelo, but there's a ton of other guys on this team that are really, really awesome. I like a lot of their young guys, specifically Miles Bridges, PJ Washington, Devontae Graham has been, had an up and down season this year, but we know he had moments last season. I've really liked watching Terry Rozier. I think he's made a lot of progress. I thought that contract was pretty bad when they signed him away from Boston, but honestly, he's lived up to that number this year. Around $20 million kind of looks like a steal for a guy who's playing at his level, around 20 points a game, and has been super, super clutch for them, and has always come up super strong in these late game situations, and they always win the close game, and it's on the back of Terry Rozier. So while yes, Hayward and LaMelo are important to this team, this roster is deep. They got a lot of guys who can play, and I think they're going to still remain competitive. I know that losing these guys sucks, but I think they're going to be okay, and as long as they're healthy by the playoffs, they could be a real problem in round one. Now, I'm not saying they're going to beat the Sixers or Nets or Bucks, but if they get into that 4-5 series, I could see them, potentially winning and getting to the second round, and even if they're a lower seed, they're going to be a tough out for anybody in the postseason. I think the one thing about this Hornets season that the team might look back and regret is not making a move at the deadline, because they had a couple of potential options on the table. I feel like they didn't end up really doing anything. They traded for Brad Wanamaker from the Warriors, which he's a nice guard to have. He's a rotation player and can maybe get some of those minutes while LaMelo's out. But they didn't really do anything huge. They were sniffing around some of the other options out there and didn't end up making a move. But that might come back to haunt them. Now, obviously, you can't predict the Hayward injury and stuff, so they didn't plan for needing another guy who can score. But that might be one thing to maybe look back on. I heard rumored interest in Evan Fournier, who ended up going for only 2 second-round picks, so maybe they could have gotten in on that. And there was rumors about Vucevic as well, who they didn't end up going for. So, because they had the Zeller expiring contract, and also Devontae Graham's on an expiring deal. Who knows if you want to pay him this offseason, right? So they had a couple of assets to be able to use, plus all their own first-round picks, of course. So they had a couple of assets to use. They didn't end up cashing in on any of that. They may regret that when it comes to the playoffs this year, because this is a roster that looks like they can make some noise. So maybe not maximizing what you have this season might have been a mistake. But this is a team on the rise. Hayward is a veteran, but they've got a lot of young guys on this roster, like I said. LaMelo looks like a future star, and so this is going to be a team that is going to be really, really exciting for many years to come, and I'm excited for it, because the Hornets have always been a team that I've kind of I think they've kind of flown under the radar. Even though they haven't been very good, a lot of people haven't been paying attention to what Charlotte's doing, and specifically this past off season, I always felt like they were a team that was just like a totally blank slate. Like, they had a couple of young guys on the roster that might be keepers, but they had that 3rd overall pick and a ton of cap space, and it's like, okay, I'm excited to see what this team's going to do, because they can really, just, if they have good leadership, they can just, go in and completely clean the slate and just find guys who work and find guys who fit. And for the most part, I feel like they did that this past off season. So I really like the moves that the Hornets have made. I think they're going to be a fun team the rest of the season, even with the injuries they've had to deal with, and I'm excited to watch them moving forward, because they seem to be well run and well put together after a long time of not being that way. So yeah, the Hornets, man, they're just fun. But yeah, I think that's about all I have on the Charlotte Hornets and Gordon Hayward having to miss some time. But like I said at the top of the video, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, ring the bell if you want to, leave a comment letting me know what you guys think about the Hornets, the Hayward injury, how good you think they're going to be the rest of the year, where might they end up in the playoffs. Would love to hear your thoughts down below. But with all that said, I'll see you guys in the next one.